Welcome to Nuanced Conversations, the podcast where depth meets dialogue, hosted by Dr. George E. Hurt. This show explores the gray areas of life, where faith, wisdom, and real-world complexities intersect. No easy answers, just honest conversations that challenge, inspire, and inform. Get ready to lean in, listen closely, and explore the nuance. This is Nuanced Conversation.
Greetings. Welcome to another episode of the Nuanced Conversation podcast. My name is George Hurt. I am the creator and curator of this space. Thank you so much for tuning in to our second season. And I have, again, sometimes we overuse the word friend, and certainly we overuse the notion of brother. But this is a friend and a brother, not just a brother beloved, who was kind enough, his most tremendous busy schedule, to make time to come sit down with us. He has a story of overcoming adversity, which all of us have faced, but not always we have to face that with the outside rumblings trying to make their position and their opinions known and felt in that. We'll get into that as much as he feels comfortable with it. But more importantly, he offers us so much from the spiritual realm, from the social realm as it relates to social justice, from the political realm, and certainly in his current role, which soon will be transitioning out of. He served his faithful terms. He submitted to the bylaws and constitutions. He didn't extend that, which many of us would have loved for him to do so. He is the pastor of the historical Willow Street Baptist Church in Los Angeles, California. He's homegrown. He's a Dodgers fan, Laker fan. If it got LA, he down with it.
I'm down with it.
Pastor, president, preacher par excellence, Dr. K.W. Tulis. How you doing, sir?
Man, I'm doing good, George. I'm just so happy to be here. I'm excited about all that you're doing. I appreciate that introduction, man. I'm going to take you all across the world with me.
Absolutely.
And have you introduce me.
Absolutely.
But I want to say thank you, man, for having me on this gracious platform, a platform that is growing, a platform that means a lot to our community, because just seeing the transparency that you bring out of people. It's a platform that I love, that I'm honored to be a part of.
Man, appreciate it. We got to swear you in. That's what we have to do to everybody that come here. So you got to swear to be open, to be honest, to be transparent, to be intelligent in the Nuanced Conversation podcast.
Man, I do.
Yes, yes, we got it.
I do.
Listen, this is a space that's meant to operate in the gray, not the black and white. To be nuanced, thus the name. We're comfortable with black and white. We're comfortable. This is wrong. This is right. But sometimes, and most times in life, the groove is in the middle. And as it relates to that, that's from religion to social norms, pop culture, and politics. You can speak to all of that in so many ways, on so many levels. But before we dig into any nuance as it relates to those categories, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm doing good, man. I in the words of one of them famous songwriters, I don't look like what I've been through. And so I'm thankful, I'm grateful, but I'm thankful that God, through it all, has brought me closer and closer to him. So I'm a work in progress. I still got my smile, and I'm looking forward to the greater works that God has in store.
What have you been through?
Man, been through a life. Life be lifing.
Life be
you know
lifing.
What I mean? That's what they say. Life be lifing, man. And so in my time here on earth of understanding that my life, even from birth, was birthed through struggle, meaning that, I was raised by a 16-year-old single mother here in Los Angeles, trying to raise a man in that day and time.
And what is that time frame in general?
That's 1977. Born in Compton, raised in South Los Angeles to a mother who all she wanted was to have her son to just be a strong and productive young man, a mother that taught me how to be independent at a young age, being raised in South Los Angeles, going through the struggles of just hoping I can get to and from school. I went to a high school called Locke High School in Los Angeles, and most people say there's nothing good coming from that neighborhood. So at the end of the day, you know, I pushed a life that, you know, was I try to live a life that was pleasing to God and pleasing to the community. So I've had the best of all worlds in life, you know. So when I talk about struggles started with me from a young age, from high school to where I am now. So, and as I said, through it all, you know, God has literally brought me to this place, and I still got my smile.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that. When your mom have you at 16, is she still in high school?
My mother's still in high school, single mother. She was visiting an Army base, visiting her sister, and got pregnant in Killeen, Texas.
Oh, wow.
And she moved on back to California, and she recognized she was pregnant with a young boy. And she, like I said, when she gave birth to me, she had a great, strong community, had a wonderful grandmother, wonderful aunties, and they raised me in Compton, California. So with that being said, you know, I've seen struggle, you know.
So she was 16, she's still living with your grandma. And
she was a kid.
She's still in high school.
What they say, babies raising babies, you know. So
does she communicate back to her sister this news, or
she didn't say nothing? No, you know, it's funny. Fast forwarding, I was a child being raised by a strong woman, and she felt she can do it all by herself.
Oh, wow.
You know, so she, you know, only thing I knew of my dad was his name. Only thing I knew of my dad was he lived in Texas somewhere. And but she went into life doing it all by herself. And through that, I've seen the struggles of a single mom trying to make the best for her children. And through that, you know, life, as I say, be lifing. And at the end of the day, here I am today.
What I'm asking a question about the progression there, but also that experience in your background and knowing the bravery and courage of your mom, and thus not just having you, but developing you. Does that in any way feed your perspective on the hot topic debate today that's labeled as pro-life and pro-choice?
100%. You know, it doesn't fuel, I believe, you know, in the woman's right to choose, even as a preacher, as a pastor, as progressive as that might sound in the minds of some theologians. I believe that God gives us all the ability to have choice. And I'm thankful that my mother chose to, you know, keep me a young man when I'm sure it was all forms of ways, from adoptions to abortion, that she could have dealt with the situation. But she chose to jump in and say, hey, I'm going to raise this young man to be a productive and honest person in the community.
Yeah, that's interesting that you would have that based off of not even making an assessment on it in this point of the conversation, but just from your background to still have that for those who are of a like-minded position. I hope they would appreciate that.
Yeah,
coming from your experience. So you're growing up. Where does church enter into this shaping of yourself in those early years?
Well, that's a good question because, you know, growing up, my mother, she wanted the best for me. And so she exposed me to private schools from all across the city of LA. And so I really met Christ real young. And I was raised in a household that loved Christ. We didn't go to church, but, you know, we loved Christ.
Through schools?
Through schools,
through these Catholic schools?
Through these Episcopal schools, Catholic schools.
Okay.
I've learned about Christ, you know, so I always knew in my spirit from the age of 5 to 10, whenever my mother stopped being able to afford to pay for my private school, I learned about Christ. And so
she's 22 at this point,
she's
paying
about 22,
for you to go through private school.
Paying for me to get there. And, you know, I was raised on a street in Los Angeles, 92nd Street. It was on 92nd and Avalon. And the way Christ became real to me was it was some missionaries walking down the middle of the hood, seeing some young black men playing basketball, coming in and engaging with us. And they invited us to the church down the street from our home, which was South Los Angeles Baptist Church, a very familiar church. At that time, the pastor was Pastor Curtis Morris. Okay. And so they invited me to church. I went to church. I learned a little bit more about Jesus. And I found something very special at church, Pastor Hurt. I found donuts.
My God.
Donuts during the Sunday school, man.
Yeah.
And those Sunday school donuts drove me to church week in and week out. I just wanted to get a donut.
You want to get a donut?
A donut every week.
Getting the bread of life.
And not the bread. I wanted a donut, a glazed
donut. Started with the bread.
Yeah.
Human bread.
And so, you know, particularly at a time when I was 13, my mother experienced what was rapid in our community. She was a drug addict. And one particular day, me and my siblings was at home. My mother said, we're going to have
siblings. So you've had,
I've had 2 siblings.
So you were first. And
I was the first, and then my mother got remarried, and she had three different children, but at this time it was only 2 of us.
Got you.
And so
she got married.
She got married. Well, she
eventually get remarried.
It was a community marry, meaning that he was my stepdad and he wasn't my stepdad, if you know what I mean. So, long story short, I'm 13. The social worker came to our home and said to me and my little brother at the time, I'm here to put you all in foster care. And me and my brother looked at each other and said, you're going to put us in foster care for what? And they said, well, your mother has a drug problem. Matter of fact, she said, she didn't say that. She said, your mother's a crackhead. And she's tested positive for drugs. And I'm here to take you out this home because your mother can't take care of you. And I remember crying with my brother. We holding each other. You're not going to separate us from each other. And my mother was crying, you know, because she was like looking. She said, but I'm going to give your mama one chance. And if she can get herself together, you all can stay in this environment, but she has to show the work in progress. Me knowing the devastation of drugs in our community, I just knew that it was no hope. I just knew me and my brother was going into a foster home. But I remember going to church for donuts, the glazed donuts. And I remember a pastor by the name of Pastor Morris preaching a sermon about going into your secret closet and praying. And so that night I said, I'm going to give it a shot. That night, I remember going into my secret closet, praying, and I said to the Lord, I said, if you just help my mother one time, I promise you, I'll serve you till I die. This is 13 years old. And just to fast forward my sad story, I've been serving God ever since. God delivered my mother from crack cocaine. My mother went back to our childhood church, the First Antioch Missionary Baptist Church in Los Angeles. And she literally gave her life to Christ. And she took her children to church with her. And that's where I saw the power of the church community, how they loved my mother despite her challenges that she had. She had a pastor that loved her. She had members that rallied around her. And I saw the power of the church community. And I've been in church ever since. And here it is, 34 years later.
Yeah.
My mother has been clean from crack cocaine.
God be praised.
She's preaching in the
Wow.
pulpit. She serves at my church. And this is the testimony. Her testimony became my testimony because her testimony brought me closer to God.
What are other things that you're struggling with, even in light of being connected to the church, dealing with this reality of the stigmatization and we're the same age in our community of, I mean, kids could be, as relates to that. What are the things that you're yet struggling with in this point?
Well, I mean, when we think about our communities as a whole, there's so many different things that our community, our faith community, is struggling with, and ultimately, at the end of the day, I believe we're living in a time where this is not grandma church, and so what individuals are looking for is leaders and pastors who are transparent, who can relate to many of the struggles. I mean, you're dealing with a new wave of alcoholism, drug abuse. We're living in a society that's not kind to the church, and so ultimately, I believe it's up to us as leaders, leaders within our community, to continue to lead that charge and let people know that Jesus is the way, he is the truth, he is the light. But I believe a lot of times people are looking at our lives for that. And because of that, many times we become targets of the cultures of this world. If it's the council culture, whatever it might be, trying to stigmatize the church as not being relevant today. And so we're dealing with so much as people, but again, being transparent and being a transparent leader in days and times, and letting individuals know that, when you're standing for something, you're going to automatically be a target for, of good and bad.
No, I appreciate you saying that, but I think my question more is like still at the point of you being 13.
Okay.
And having all of these triumphant moments in your life through what your mom has overcome, you as a family unit has overcome.
Got it.
How First Antioch played a role. Still looking at you in your early teens there.
Got it.
What are the things that you're yet struggling with at that point?
Man, I'm struggling with my identity. I don't know if I want to be a gangster in my community or if I want to be this church boy that goes to church faithfully every Sunday, who the pastor look out in the audience, and out of all the young people, he picks me to be his armor bearer.
Wow.
So I get to walk around and carry my pastor briefcase, and my pastor in my early days was a little fat, flashy. He drove around in a limousine. So Pastor Hurt, I used to go around in my neighborhood in a limousine, because my pastor rode like that,
And
but
your pastor was
L.C. Carter.
Yeah.
His name was Dr. L.C. Carter. He's probably the most influential man that I met at that time. I mean, he showed me the importance of being godly through your works. Individuals loved him because he was pure, he was transparent. He'll walk out and run around the neighborhood with no shoes, talking to people. He taught me how to be an activist. A lot of people think, Sharpton and all these people. No, L.C. Carter taught me as a young man. So I was in that identity stage, 13, 14, but, the church won.
Wow. So when did you make the transition in your mind to like, hey, I'm not I'm not a thug,
Right.
I'm not a gangbanger, I'm not a drug dealer, none of these things. I'm set on the path for Christ. I know you say that Pastor Carter played a great role in it. Well, I guess a better question would be what was the next step in that evolution? Your armor bearer, going on, what was the next step?
Armor bearer, football player at Locke High School,
what position?
D tackle,
Okay.
offensive line. you know, trying to find myself, minister of defense of the football field, pray before every football game. You know, so trying to find myself
Minister
in
of
the,
defense is
yeah,
not
I
a
was
it's
like,
not a
no,
it's not a athletic term. It's that you were the spiritual like chaplain of the team.
I was a spiritual chaplain of the team.
Yeah.
I prayed every game. You know, played on the field. Reggie White, minister of defense. Get it, Reggie White.
Yeah.
No, just play. But yeah,
But you are not in ministry at this point.
No,
Okay.
nowhere near.
That's what I was trying to clarify.
Yes,
yeah.
no, I was not a minister at that time. I was just a young dude at church. You know, going to church every week. Had a responsibility to carry my pastor briefcase. That was my job. Watch my pastor. You know, carry his robe. You know, whatever it was, I found that to be a job that, you know, God put me in, you know.
When did you start preaching?
And fast forward, I started preaching at the age of 18.
18.
My pastor retired, L.C. Carter. And so when he retired, it left a void in my life because that father figure that I developed and, you know, that came into my life, he retired.
He retired?
He retired at a young age and moved to Houston, Texas.
To do what?
To retire. Just
really?
retire. He retired
How
from
old
preaching.
was
He was in his 60s.
Okay.
You know, he wanted to go back home to Texas. So him and his family retired. We had a big celebration. He went away, and it was like another void in my life. So I had no father figure again. You know, I've never met my real dad at that particular time. So Dr. Carter left, and I had no one to talk to about some of the dreams and thoughts that was going on through my mind. So I was still active in church, still participating, choir, junior deacon, brotherhood, whatever it might have been. And I had no one to really talk to about the certain things that was going on in my mind. And so at the age of 17, one of the church members that knew I had a great relationship with Pastor Carter, she purchased me a flight to go head up to Houston, Texas, where my pastor resided at that time. And I went there, and in a busy Houston, Texas mall, I think it was the Galleria, me and Pastor Carter was walking through the mall, and he sat down and he talked to me and took time to talk to me for about 60 minutes. And I professed my calling to preach to him. And he said to me, I always knew you was called to preach. I just wanted to wait for you to tell me, for we can help kind of develop you. And so I was still without a pastor in Los Angeles, but Pastor Carter recommended a young upcoming preacher by the name of Nathaniel Haley to be the next pastor of First Antioch. The problem is First Antioch just took a couple of years to, you know, call Pastor Haley to become the pastor. But the way things work, when I got back to Los Angeles, as I stood in front of my house, that young preacher, Nathaniel Haley, saw me in front of my home, stopped, pulled over, and said, let's go to lunch. And there we went to lunch, and I was able to tell him, he was an associate minister at United Christian at the time, but I was able to tell him that I was called to preach. And he said to me, he pledged to me that day that he would help assist me every step of the way.
Wow.
And so I had a big brother then to kind of help nurture and help structure my life. And when he was called to become pastor of the First Antioch Church, a few months later, I preached my first sermon under his leadership.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing story. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. And so, are you in school at this point? Are you just ministering, working the 9 to 5, 5 to 9?
Yeah. So, you know, my youthfulness, I've always had a desire to help people. And so my family created a nonprofit when I was 17, 18 years old, Making a Difference Foundation. And so growing up and serving, you know, I automatically became the president of this foundation at a young age, 18 years old.
Wow.
And with that being said, we brought so many opportunities to our church, our local church, First Antioch, Pastor Haley, and he allowed me to be me. And so with that being
What does
said,
that mean?
he allowed me to just work my magic. I've always been a one that served people. And so we brought in a food program.
Gotcha. Okay.
We brought in different things that would help cultivate and to grow our ministry. I was the youth pastor of First Antioch under his leadership.
How long before you became youth pastor? Right away?
I became youth pastor right away.
Right.
And so, I established my mark at the church. Young people began to come in droves, and we built one of the top youth and young adult programs in Los Angeles, under his leadership. And so my way of things was, I worked. I was in school, Southwest College. After I graduated from Locke, I went to college, and but I was always involved in the community, always working.
Play football there?
I didn't play football. I retired from football, and I focused on helping people. I got some great opportunities of employment with the state of California. I was meeting some unique people through a lot of my service. And it really I was a young activist, always trying to fight for people's social justice and things of that matter, man. So this was something I was always born to serve, man.
So and is this how you eventually connect with National Action Network, which is led by Reverend Al Sharpton? How does that relationship and marriage take place?
So in 2004 here in Los Angeles, there was a shooting that took place where the LAPD SWAT team shot a little baby, and her name was Susie Pena. She was a 2-year-old. She was being held in her father's arm, and the SWAT team shot and hit Susie Pena, and it became uproar here in Los Angeles. And I was an activist as a young man by Dr. Carter. We used to do a lot of protests, up with hope, down with dope, So I rallied with many of our senior sages in Los Angeles, Dr. Charles Mims, Dr. P.J. Strongs, Dr. Jumpin' Joe Lee. These are young people these are pastors that I saw leading demonstrations in our city. So I went and I paid my respect to Susie Pena, and I met an activist who I would never call his name. I met an activist, and he asked me, he said, why don't you come with me? Let me help mentor you. And so this activist, he's a Muslim activist. His name is Najee. He took me up under his wings. And that night he said, man, we got a activist from the East Coast coming to town. His name is Al Sharpton. Do you want to meet him? Of course, I want to meet Reverend Sharpton. So that night I was introduced to Reverend Sharpton, and the activist Najee, he said to Sharpton, he said, this is a young preacher in our city. I'm a Muslim. He said, you're a Christian civil rights leader. He said, I can't do much with them and mentoring. Would you take him up under your wings? And at that point, that's when Reverend Sharpton agreed to mentor me and to take me up under his wings. And I'm so grateful that God brought him into my life.
What was that like? Did he give you his phone number, his email, his assistant number?
He didn't give me his number.
Yeah.
He didn't give me an email. He was kind of that type of leader where I was going to have to find my way.
Right.
And so he invited me to the National Action Network conference. And I made my way to New York City.
Listen at you.
And I went there with, no directions other than just to get to this conference. And when he saw me at that conference, I guess he realized I got something here. Yeah. This man made his way there, and that's when he eventually exchanged numbers with me. That's when he eventually introduced me to other leaders like myself from across the country. And that's when, he kind of pledged his allegiance to helping to develop me.
Wow. And at what point do you join formally the National Action Network?
Immediately. Reverend,
that first conference.
yeah, man, Reverend Sharpton was a magnet. I mean, seeing the magnitude of this conference, I'm in a place where, not too many preachers in Los Angeles are stepping out and saying, hey, I want to lead these marches. I want to lead these demonstrations around social justice. So I didn't really have
no competition per se.
I had no one to really mentor me.
Mentor, gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
right. I had a Chip Murray, but our age gap was kind of out the way, but, so Sharpton said, I'll teach you. I'll show you. And right then and there, he pledged his allegiance to me. And that's when I joined National Action Network. That's when I became a leader in National Action Network, working with the local chapter here, which wasn't really fully developed because, again, there's two Reverend Sharptons, right? There's the tracksuit, controversial Reverend Sharpton, and then there's the Sharpton that we all know today. Yeah. So he was evolving.
Gotcha.
At 40, and so he allowed me to. I watched him evolve. I watched him go from big Rev to slim Rev. You know what I mean? So I watched him evolve. Yeah. I watched his politics evolve, and so he took me through that lesson by simply watching and seeing what was happening. And so I'm grateful for that.
Thank you for joining us on Nuanced Conversations. We invite you to return next week as we continue this dialogue. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode and share this conversation with others who may find it valuable. Until next time.